Welcome to Pause for the Truth, where you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Good evening, everyone. I'm still bopping to our lead-in musical, our lead-in music because it's such. I just love that beat. We are having with us Miss Turner. She's a little bit behind in terms of her technical skills. Yeah, that usually me play that role, but Miss Turner played that role this evening. She decided to give me a break, is what she did. Miss Turner, how you doing?
Oh, I'm just peachy. As my mom would say, the devil is busy, but I logged on with no more challenges.
All right, well, give him some of these jalapeno peppers and let's see how well he handles that. Miss Turner, I know you know our guests. I'm going to let you go ahead and do your thing, and I just chime in when I need to.
Well, first of all, Dr. Kane, we need to recognize our behind the scenes guy who loves to pop in every now and then. Looks like it's more now than then.
And then, yeah.
Tyrone, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful. And trust me, I'm just keeping your spot warm for you.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. All right. I appreciate it.
That's
Well,
out of a spot. Never mind.
Well, listen, I am excited tonight. We have a very interesting topic, something that's very important, probably not many people talk about, particularly if you were not a part of the military. It's something that you just didn't have a conversation about unless you had a loved one who was in the military. And I should say my favorite veteran was my Korean War veteran father, Ben Turner, and was delighted several years ago to attend an event that then Congresswoman Corrine Brown had recognizing Korean veterans. And I never thought about until that occasion that my dad was a Korean War veteran. So, anyway, we are pleased to have two distinguished gentlemen, and someone else is going to be joining us. Hopefully, she's not having technical difficulties. But a few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of facilitating a conversation with some veterans, and I learned a lot. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've got to get this guy's phone number or email address or something. And that is Errol White. How are you doing this evening, Errol?
It's a good evening. How about you?
Oh, just peachy. It's a beautiful day in Florida. I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Well,
So
it's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
absolutely. And our guests are in for a treat because they're definitely going to learn from you. I learned a lot from you all that day. Also joining us is someone who I've been knowing a long time, actually. Hadn't seen him in a while, but uh, great to have Dr. Ken Nixon this evening. How are you doing this evening, Dr. Nixon?
I am doing wonderful, doing good, and I'm just glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to go ahead and get the topic started as we talk about Black veterans. Issues, benefits, and resources. Again, as I mentioned, I had the pleasure of having a conversation with Errol and some other veterans recently, and really was, Errol, quite surprised some of the things I learned. So let me start by asking a question. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, and please check me, to both of you. Please check me if I'm putting you on the spot, or just simply say, well, I don't have that information. But do you have, Errol, any idea about how many Black veterans there are in the area here in Jacksonville or surrounding counties?
I do have some of the census data from 2019, but that information is upwards of 5 years old at this point. But one of the things that came up in our current mayor, Donna Deegan's campaign, is that upwards of 25% of Jacksonville's population is either an active duty service member, Guard Reserve, or is connected with their family member being in the service. And myself,
Wow.
I fall in that category, just like Dr. Nixon. We both had the honor of serving our country. I've served in the Florida Air National Guard for 22 years. So that means that my family is within that 25% of the Jacksonville population who's connected to the armed services of the Department of Defense in some way.
And thank you. Forgive my rudeness for not asking what's your real connection to the military. So thank you for your 22 years of service with the Air National Guard. Dr. Nixon, what about you? What was your, and I'll get back to the stats, but let me give Dr. Nixon a chance to share what was your military or what is your military background or experience?
Well, I was lucky enough to have the U.S. Navy pay my way through medical school.
Okay.
Once I got accepted to med school, I got a Navy scholarship. And so in doing that, once I gave my 4 years, I was supposed to give 4 years back, but I ended up giving them 22 years also.
Oh,
So I
wow.
so I retired from the Navy after 22 years. I was a Navy captain, and I would have stayed longer, but they sent me to Iraq, and they wanted me to go back to Iraq, and I said, "Well, it's time to retire."
Time
My,
to
my
retire.
yeah.
So is that how both of you ended up in Northeast Florida through your military
For me,
service?
for sure, my very first duty station was the USS Saratoga,
Mm.
and the Saratoga was stationed here in Jacksonville. And of the 22 years, I probably spent 7 or 8 years here in Jacksonville.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, now that you bring that, and since you brought it up, back in 1990, whatever it was, the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, I served, not military. I don't want anybody to mistake that. But I was the go-to doc in the emergency room doc over at Mayport in Jacksonville, because all the other docs that were enrolled in the military was on the Saratoga or the Forrestal at that
Hmm.
time,
Right.
and servicing our veterans. Even though our veterans' families still needed some assistance, and those veterans that was not immediately, well, I say veterans, but at the time they may not have been veterans, but service members were not immediately involved in the Gulf War for whatever reason. But that I remember the Saratoga and the Forrestal, and that's why I had to comment on it, because you guys had a rough go at it for a long time with
Yeah.
your families and the sacrifices that you guys made. So again, I commend you guys for doing that.
Thank you. And Errol, let me get back to your again. I concur with Dr. Kane. Thank you both for your service. But Errol, let me get back to you and say I'm blown away. 1 out of 4 people in this area are affiliated in some way with the military. Like, wow, what an impact on our economy, wouldn't you say? And you're muted, by the way. You're muted, Errol.
There you go.
Yes, so most definitely, it is a tremendous impact, both financially for the community, as well as for the growth of Jacksonville as a whole when we look at the holistic numbers. And so while Dr. Nixon was talking, I actually pulled the data for Health Zone 1, and it looks like just alone within that Health Zone 1 area, there's 6,800 veterans, and predominantly within Health Zone 1 is going to be Black and Brown individuals who live within those 6 different area codes. And so,
Wow.
yep, I see you raise your hand, Dr. Kane. And so just quantifying that out to the other counties within Duval County, or the other zip codes within Duval County, you can only imagine that your zip code for NAS Jackson, Mayport, even Cecil Field are going to have higher numbers, just as a broad spectrum for the veteran community. And then to your first question, I'm actually from Jacksonville, born and raised here in Jacksonville. So I had the pleasure of serving with the 125th Fighter Wing located at the Jacksonville International Airport, which is truly one of Jacksonville's best kept secrets. Like, nobody knows that the Air Force is here in Jacksonville because we're such a large Navy town. but I did the majority of my time assigned there. And then I did my last 13 years in recruiting command here in Jacksonville. So I was able to come back home and recruit my hometown.
So let me ask a question. When someone serves in the military, and either of you or both of you can answer the question, what issues do people generally face when they're coming back into the general population? Be it health issues, Dr. Nixon, or otherwise, Errol?
Yeah, I can answer that partially. It kind of depends on the the their specific training or the specific rating that they have in the military. That's one thing. If they saw military action and might have evidence of PTSD, that's another thing. The military can be pretty rough on your body if it's for certain things because you have to run and jump out of perfectly good airplanes and swim, and it just depends on kind of what you do. So by the time they're ready to be released from the military, there's a lot of injuries that can happen, and you'll see a lot of pain in the joints, muscle pain, joint pain, back pain, you name the pain. The vets can have it, and then there's the mental health issues also, especially associated with PTSD, and PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. It might not be immediate. You might come home and you're doing okay, and your family is happy to see you, but 2 years, 3 years, 5 years later, you can get evidence of PTSD, or you can just have a breakdown from it because you didn't really deal with it initially. So those are the kind of things that I see at the VA, because I'm on the health side. There's a lot to the VA. So I'm with the Veterans Health, the VHA, Veterans Health Association, not association. What does A stand for? VHA. Anyway, but the
Administration?
administration, that's it. There's Veterans Benefit Administration, which is a whole different wing where they try to get benefits based on their health conditions. And there's other things too, including, if you decide to be buried, because everyone's ultimately going to die. And there's a burial portion also. So if you decide to go to be buried at the military,
National Cemetery?
exactly, you can. That's another section of the VA.
Yeah, I learned about that when my dad died. I had to learn quickly what that whole thing was in terms of engaging the National Cemetery. Thank you, Dr. Nixon. Errol, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of what types of things, challenges do veterans face as they acclimate or readjust into the community?
Even on a very important topic within the post-traumatic stress disorder arena, there could be a multitude of triggers that an individual can have, and the triggers can come on any time post-deployment, and there is no rhyme, no reason. It could just happen, and that veteran is now in a state of distress. But one of the big things is the way the service members are reintegrated by their branch of service. And what that looks like for each service member is going to vary based on their experience overseas, whether they were in actual combat or combative zone or had to do care for members who were in combative zones. So all of those things can play long-term or can have long-term effects with a veteran and even their family once they come back, depending on the type of integration, treatment, or care they receive coming home. So it's a myriad of areas that we could discuss with that, because it's the mental health piece, it's the physical health piece, it's also the financial piece for some individuals, and then it's your behavior with your family can be skewed also based upon, again, what situations you've had to endure while you were overseas. But I think Dr. Nixon did a great job of hitting on some of those pieces and talking about some of the care that veterans can receive too when they come back.
So are there, I mean, not to make it a black white thing or black and other, but are there any particular issues that Black veterans in particular face more so than the general population that you can share? Either of you?
Well, I can say this. When, whenever I get a black patient, that's new, they're shocked because there's not that many of us that are in the VA. As a matter of fact, I mean there's a brother. Oh, I wish I can remember his name. That was in the VA. You all probably know him. I'm sure he's in his 80s by now. That he
Ronald.
Yes, yes, yes. He was in the when I first came in the VA, we met, and he kind of gave me a
But he was the man for the
yes,
VA at the
yeah.
time.
Who was that?
Dr. Good as I know his last name, but you know, I just call him Ron. But
Mhm.
he's a community physician that served
Oh, okay.
our community well. It'll come to me in a second.
Okay.
It'll come to me.
Excellent position.
Yeah.
And I was, truth be told, at that time, because I did not see, because again, I see a lot of VA patients, but at that time, I did not know of any black physicians in the VA. And he was kind of a pioneer, at least here in Jacksonville, as it relates to physicians being in the VA. And the patients just loved him. They went after him. They even if the appointment was postponed about 2-3 months because of his rigorous schedule, they would wait all that time just so they could see him, because he dedicated so much time and energy and compassion to the VA, to the vets.
What is his last name? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. So, Dr. Nixon, what were you going to say in terms of the issues that Black veterans face?
Well, one thing that I noticed pretty quickly was how they probably had less benefits than they probably deserved. I can give one example where I had this young female who was discharged from the Marine Corps because of multiple sclerosis. And when I saw her, I was shocked. She had zero benefits, 0% benefits, which is just kind of like blew me away. So ultimately, we were able to get her 100% benefits because that's kind of what she deserved, because she had those particular benefits due her. But I see that more frequently in my vets of color for sure. And then there's the kind of the VA is probably a good example of socialized medicine, truth be told. So it's what happens, there's those same things that happen in organized non-VA medicine where, you know, your ability to listen to their problems can be obscured by providers who aren't socially aware of different ethnic groups. I'll put it that way. So they end up in my panel because the vets can switch doctors if they feel like they're not being served properly.
Thank you. Errol, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Or are there any specific issues you see Black veterans facing as they, I forgot the word that you used in terms of coming back into the community?
Yes.
Uh-oh, your volume. Okay, go ahead, say something now. I couldn't hear you at first.
Yes. So in discussing the reintegration piece, well, before we even talk about the reintegration piece, there's a systemic issue that, and I'll speak specifically for the Air Force. They did a study on that showed that Black and brown airmen faced harsher and more stringent punishments for the same crimes that their white counterpart would have done. And so if we fast forward that and bring that level of of systemic punishment forward for a member who's in service, then you can only imagine what the type of care could be for an individual trying to reintegrate into service or into a civilian capacity. So there are some things that could definitely be changed. I know that the Air Force holistically is trying to identify and mitigate these issues. And how that looks is particularly removing individuals from chain of command, changing different rules and regulations. One of the rules and regulations that just changed prior to my retirement in April 2023 was the hair regulation. And so that to me, I showed that the Air Force was actively trying to make a change to recognize that Black and Brown individuals have different hair care needs, right? So, so to that point, there are issues that have been identified and that the different branches are trying to mitigate and try to bring closure to and better assist our veteran community.
Let me say this, Ms. Turner, and I'm going to kind of generalize it with what both of our guests are saying, and that is the health disparities that Black folks face in the military pretty much mimics the same health disparities they face in the general population. To be quite frank with you, maybe a bit more a closed community because being a veteran is a closed community. You know, it's very, I don't want to say privileged, the word, that's not the word I'm looking for, but they're unique because of the sacrifices that they make in terms of, and what they have to give up to be able to serve us and the things that they do for us, but to be rewarded with it's bad enough Black folks get the kind of disparities that they run across just in the general population. But this specific population allows us to remain a democracy, and which is supposedly the crust and the backbone of our country. But yet they don't receive, and it's been historical. I don't need to remind everybody what it meant, and from the Civil War, even before then, and on down. Some of the problem we have is what it just said in terms of that mental health stigma that you see a lot of the veterans experience. When they come in, because they're Black, they are stigmatized or is stigmatized as being they're crazy or they're faking it or whatever it is that they do in terms of discriminating against those Black vets. And so they wind up having, to be quite frank with you, a diminished responsibility from the feds, from the federal government, as to what they owe these veterans. Okay, and they're not saying that they ain't better than the other veterans. They're just saying we're no lesser than the other veterans that are participating in our system. They got a mental health stigma. They got economic inequality. They face high rates of unemployment, face high rates of underemployment. I mean, your whole income disparities, as you see with white veterans. And then I don't even want to. I mean, we have to, but it really pains me to go into the homelessness side that Black veterans see compared to our white veterans. And again, this is why I guess they're the ones that need to be actually discussing this. But I'm passionate about how our veterans, and especially our Black veterans, are being treated, because they allow me to be able to sit in front of this microphone or to be able to go to work every day and not be immediately threatened by other powers outside our nation.
Was there a question behind that, Dr. Kane, or you were just giving your sermonette?
I need to get something off my chest.
Dr. Nixon, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I would just echo that, in that the patients that I see and the patients I come across, a lot of them have just gone through unnecessary issues, in trying to take care of their health issues. I've seen people that, oh my gosh, just simple treatment of chronic diseases where a pill is they're just not discovered. So and they're kind of shocked with how much I can do for them, just with one visit. And they say, oh my gosh, I've been coming to the VA for 10 years and no one asked me that question. I hear that so much. It's like, oh my gosh, what is going on? But it's a challenge. It's a good challenge for me because haven't been in the military forever. Well, for 21 years, I've seen a lot of things, and I've seen where those disparities have happened, and just witnessing it, I'm pretty much ready for it now. So right now I've seen the disparities in how the um similar what they call judicial things that happen in the military are just different. I've seen it, and just to witness it is just and at some point you have something to do with it as you get higher in rank. But at some point in early on, I just saw it with my I was picking my jaw off the floor a
Wow.
lot initially.
Wow. So, Errol, thank you, Dr. Nixon. So, Errol, what are some things that you have been doing in the community to help veterans understand what resources are available for them and the benefits, as Dr. Nixon talked about, that they should be taking advantage of?
Dr. Kane hit on two really good points. First is the discrimination when we talk about the VA claims process, where Black and Brown individuals, and this came directly from the Veteran Affairs Administration's press secretary, came out and acknowledged that Black and Brown individuals, one, received lesser rating than their white counterpart for the same illness or injury, and they received a lower approval ratings for any injury or illness that was sustained during service. And then the other piece that Dr. Kane talked about were those social determinants post-service that really come into play. And when we talk about the social determinant piece, we're talking about the healthcare, we're talking about education, unemployment, or underemployment, and then housing. And so one thing that I've been passionate about is working with the Jacksonville Urban League in their Veteran Community Service Center, where we're trying to, especially within Health Zone 1, which is the key target area for the Urban League's empowerment, the Community and Veteran Empowerment Center, where we're trying to, one, identify the veteran population, and then make them aware of the different services, especially within healthcare and mental health that they can receive through the Urban League, connect them to their VA benefits through the VSOs, whether that's through the City of Jacksonville or the FDVA, and then prepare them for that transition. And what does that look like? Making sure that they have the resume skills, the interview skills, that they are properly prepared when we talk about the transition of their service job, whether it's their NEC, their MOS, their AFSC, how that converts over to a civilian job, making sure that they are able to translate that skill set so they don't, like Dr. King said, become unemployed or even underemployed. And then lastly, we want to empower them economically. And how does that look? That looks like providing them the tools that they can have for if they want to become entrepreneurs. So the Urban League has an entrepreneur center, which takes them everything from their initial concept to expansion of a business. And they also have access to capital upwards of $250,000 to start that business. And then the other piece is the housing. And so how do we impact housing in Jacksonville? How do we affect change? And so the Urban League has partnered with different organizations, one of which we just met with last week was Ameris Bank, where the league has access to $50,000 towards closing costs for an individual, and they do not have to be a veteran to qualify for this fee. And then we have an additional $20,000 that we partnered with Ameris Bank, where an individual can receive upwards of $70,000 towards closing costs to become homeowners, right? And we all know that becoming a homeowner is one of the first steps to creating that generational wealth. And so these are some of the steps that I've worked with the league, and we're trying to spearhead these efforts in the Health Zone 1 area to really impact change within specifically Durkeeville, La Villa, the North Downtown area, and everywhere within that Health Zone 1 is traumatized. And I know I can talk very long-winded, so please cut me off. But we're going to talk real quick about the being traumatized in Health Zone 1 and what that looks like. So the two latest mass shootings in Jacksonville all happened in Health Zone 1. That's the unfortunate shooting that was at the Dollar General. And then there was the other shooting, or the previous shooting that was at the Jacksonville Landing at the during the video game fest, right? So both of those mass shootings happened within Health Zone 1. So how do we let the community know that, hey, we have healthcare opportunities within the Urban League. We can help provide or steer you towards all types of mental health counseling, whether it's individual, group, so there's all these different things that the league is trying to change within the community and provide different resources so we can help to stem some of these issues and those social determinants that Dr. Eng was talking about.
Thank
I
you.
know we're coming up on history making moment.
Yeah.
But I just want to make this Ronald Stevens. As good as I know Ronald Stevens' name, Ronald Stevens is the doc. As far as my mentors in terms of over at the VA, Ronald Stevens was my mentor. He helped guide me through a whole bunch of this, as well as other patients. But Ronald Stevens, never forget that name, because he should have a plaque over in the VA in Jacksonville.
Was he a physician, you said?
Absolutely. One of the better, even before he got to the VA, Ron forged ahead in terms of Black folks, serving the right community, especially as Mr. White says, Health Zone 1, at one point in time, Health Zone 1 was the only Black zone in Jacksonville, and even though it wasn't called Health Zone 1 at that time. But Ron stayed in Health Zone 1. Ron was a very smart individual. He could have went anywhere he wanted to, but he was dedicated to staying in that area of town that would best serve his people. And when he kind of, I don't want to say gave up civilian life, but when he got to a point that private practice was something that he no longer sought as much as he did serving the VA. That was his words to me, because he saw what was going on with the VA, especially in Health Zone 1, okay, which I served too, by the way, but especially in Health Zone 1. When he saw the need for that, he immediately transitioned to the VA system.
Looks like that was our history maker minute.
It is. I wish I had come up with as much as I could on him, but we'll probably bring that back to part 2, which we'll talk about that later.
So each week we feature someone notable in our history, and our behind the scenes guy, Tyrone Jackson, does a phenomenal job doing his homework, bringing awareness. I know I've learned a lot. So at this point, to our guests, we're just going to pause for a moment. Don't you go anywhere. We'll come back in a moment and finish our discussion, and Tyrone will take it away for our History Maker moment.
Welcome to History Makers Minute, February 27th, 2024. Each week, we honor the enduring impact of African American history makers, those whose courage, brilliance, and perseverance have forever altered the landscape of our world. Today, we shine a light on Benjamin O. Davis Sr. and Benjamin O. Davis Jr. Sr., who was born on July 1st, 1877 in Washington, D.C., and his son Benjamin O. Davis Jr. was born December 19th, 1912. Davis Sr. came of age in a time when racial segregation was deeply entrenched in the fabric of American society. This, however, did not deter him from making his mark. Despite countless challenges thrown at him as a young African American in the U.S. Army, his unyielding determination and resilience shone through. Against all odds, Davis Sr. ascended the ranks of a system designed to hold him down, making history as the first black brigadier general. But the story doesn't end with Benjamin O. Davis. His son, Benjamin O. Davis Jr., born on December 18, 1912 in Washington, D.C., followed in his footsteps, carving his own path in the military. Davis Jr. joined the ranks and later led the famed Tuskegee Airmen, a squadron that made waves during World War II. Like his father, Davis Jr. broke barriers and set new standards for African Americans in the military. He became the first African American brigadier general in the U.S. Air Force. The legacy of General Benjamin O. Davis and his son is one of courage, determination, and unwavering commitment to service. Their groundbreaking military service revolutionized the U.S. military and inspired the African American community. Their legacy remains a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit and a beacon of hope for those who dare to dream.
Wow, that was awesome. That was awesome. I'm ashamed to say I never heard of Benjamin Davis Sr. and Jr., but that was amazing. Thank you, Tyrone. Wow, Errol
Benjamin Davis Sr., he should have been a 4-star.
Yes.
He should have, but they refused to let him do that. The Congress has to approve any flag officers like that. And I'm just going to tell you all, I've met a handful of black flag officers who became generals, who are generals and admirals. They are 10 times better than their peers.
I believe.
I'm telling you, they are. If you ever meet a flag officer that's of color, believe me, they are so much better than their peers. It's believable. It's unbelievable. I mean, you're talking to people who know a little bit about everything. Smartest people I've met in my life have been black admirals. Since I was in the Navy, I met a handful of them. So there is just in order to get to that level, you kind of have to be better than your peers because there's a lot of subjectivity in ranking. But those gentlemen are off the chain when it comes to intelligence and just general knowledge.
Well,
But
truth be told,
Thank you, Dr. Nixon.
our parents taught us you got to be 250% better than your white counterpart. That was just a rule of thumb back then, and they lived up to that. They achieved that. I see that with black physicians as well. You know, I see some of them that should have been, I mean, light years ahead of their white counterparts. Not putting down, not being racist, or not putting down any occasional individuals, but it's just I'm making sure that people understand and appreciate the contributions that we as civilians and veterans, you know, being black, that we have dedicated to our society. And regardless of what they say in terms of what happens in our school system about Black history, we, as Ms. Turner, as you are most astutely aware, that we will push the narrative of being educated about ourselves and our history to the max. And I thank Dr. Nixon for recognizing that.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. So, Errol, right before before we went to the History Maker Minute, you were about to talk about the mental health of veterans. And I wanted to ask, what in particular, if someone who's watching us has a veteran who might be coming home soon, you know, be it retirement or just on leave, what are some specific things you think that those family members or loved ones should pay attention to know that maybe there's some things going on that their veteran needs to seek help? And also, other than the VA, are there any other resources available for them that they should be taking advantage of? You're on mute. You're on mute, Errol. You're saying a lot of good stuff.
Oh, yes. Please forgive me. So I'll touch on the resource piece first. And it is very important that family members and veterans know 211 and 988. The 211 is the United Way, and they have amazing referral and resource officers who can connect them with a myriad of resources. And when we talk about those resources, it's everything from clothing to food allowances, and subsidies to short-term, long-term housing availability. So they really have a great program through the United Way's Mission United program, and that's the 211 office. And then the 988 is the DoD's suicide prevention hotline. And so any veteran can call that regardless of discharge status. And I'm not sure if you all are aware of this fact, but we're losing 22 veterans a day due to suicide. And that is a staggering amount of veterans that we are losing due to some level of mental health issue, drug abuse, addiction. There's just so many different things that and resources that are available to help curb this number of 22 a day. And so if any veteran or family member is noticing some of these issues that I'm about to discuss, please don't hesitate. Call 211, call 988, and get your veteran, your loved one, some care. And so some of the things that you want to look for when an individual comes back, or, just through normal service, any veteran can fall victim, and I don't want to say fall victim because that's a negative connotation, but any veteran can develop levels of anxiety. Any veteran, if you start to notice your veteran pulling away from you, from their family, from activities that they enjoy doing, that's definitely a trigger and a warning sign. Any veteran who changes their mood frequently and fluxes from one extreme to the other, that in itself is a sign. Any veteran that acts out, or if you know that if they have a jovial personality and all of a sudden they're more closed in, you need to make sure that individual is aware of the available resources that are out there. And I'll say this, for the airmen that were under my charge, my care, I made sure that they were aware, because post-COVID, there were so many airmen who experienced levels of change, being isolated and confined to one workspace or even their home, and not being able to socialize and have those interactions with their peer group and their counterparts. And for anybody who serves, that interaction is key and is crucial. I like to say that we are trauma bonded together because of some of the difficulties that we are faced with. You always have to do less with more. You're always anxious about getting your workload done. You don't want to let your troops down, your airmen, your soldier, sailor, marine, guardians. You don't want to let them down. So you're always trying to perform your best. You're always trying to push yourself. But you also need to find a way to have that peace. So I know that Dr. Nixon, I'm sure, has some more kinds of individuals. So I'll definitely turn it over to him and let him speak to that.
Yeah, once someone makes that phone call, there's actually a record that's created, and the very next day we get these, especially if it's a patient that has a specific primary care doctor, because once someone's in the VA system, they get assigned a doctor, and I have my 2400. But anyway, but once that record is created, there's the VA does have a plethora of mental health specialists. Not enough psychiatrists, but they do have licensed clinical social workers, and they do have psychologists. And we try to that patient is contacted the very next day by one of those professionals, and if they have to see someone like me, they'll give them an appointment in the next 3 to 5, whatever the shortest amount of time that they can get them in, and we'll get them in. And they just won't see me. They'll see other health professionals within the same day. So they work fast with the whenever they find someone who is having issues with potential suicide. Also, I wanted to say that let's say I see a patient for the first time. Every physician, maybe every physician isn't created equal, so we all know this, as we stated. But some doctors just might not recognize how depressed a patient may be or how close to suicidality a patient may be. So when they leave me, we always give a patient the option to see a mental health person before they leave the building. So that's something they implemented because of the 22 a day um,
Suicide.
incidences that were happening. So let's say they see me and I don't pick up on their depression, which is unlikely, but I'm okay with I will pick up on it 99% of the time. But if I don't, they will still see another provider where we can kind of put them in a place, get them to um, to bond with a healthcare provider and see if we can make sure that when they leave, they're safe and put them in a good, safe place. So we're pretty active in our clinics, and they do have for every medical group, they call them PACs. There is a mental health provider within our PAC that we can refer to. So very important topic.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon. One thing that we have not talked about are female veterans. We were going to have Damika Jackson on with us, and we'll have to invite her next week to really delve into it. But is there anything in particular that either of you like to mention about the particular challenges that female veterans face?
Yeah, we don't have enough. There's a plethora of female providers within the VA. There are more female providers than male providers, which is a good thing for some females, and some they don't mind. They were having trouble recruiting. I'll say it's temporary. It's cyclical, but they were having trouble recruiting gynecologists for sure. And so they sent me to this 2-week class on it. So I'm a woman's health provider personally, but I can say, yeah, no, I can say, I mean, although I work for the health department for 8 years, and Miss Turner knows that half my patients, well, probably more than half, were female. But anyway, the female vet is a topic that is really underestimated, because there's been estimates that, I don't know, I've heard 60%, I've heard 80% of females who join the military have been molested, had some kind of trauma prior to their joining it. So they come into the military with that baggage. And then within the military, sometimes it even gets worse. And so by the time they're out the military and in the vet center, you can imagine that it is a massive challenge to manage some of the female veterans. So it's a huge. They join the military to get away, and then a lot of them have to get away from the military because they aren't treated properly once they get there. So it's it's not every female, but it's a huge unreported percentage have gone through a significant amount of trauma. And so I have to understand that when I get a female patient. I have to get that understanding just to meet them where they are, so that we can take care of whatever their needs are.
Well, as I mentioned before, what we're seeing in the military is a reflection of what goes on in the general population. And what we see in the general population is how females are discriminated against, especially Black females. And there's no difference in that than in the military. That's not to give the military a pass, because they're different breed, they're different organizations. They're supposed to be focused not only on defending our country, but also in persevering and helping those within the military survive their military experience, not just from getting shot on the field, but also the after service effect of what they need mentally, emotionally, financially, you name it. They're supposed to do that. And women are different than us men, especially when we gear all our services and thoughts toward men. And whereby women serve, I don't know the exact percentage, but a certain percentage of the military as well.
So I think, Errol, you were mentioning something, this organization that's on the screen now. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. So I want to thank Dr. Nixon for bringing up the military sexual trauma piece, because that's actually where I was going to go. That is one of the biggest issues that is facing our women service members is that piece. And I can't speak to the pre-service MS or sexual trauma piece, but definitely the while in service, that military sexual trauma piece, upwards of 40% of all service women are going to be exposed to some military sexual trauma, and whatever that looks like while they're in service. And so military sexual trauma is such a broad topic, and it covers everything from unwanted touching to actual assault. And one of the organizations here locally in Jacksonville that does a phenomenal job, and I need to make sure that Dee Quaranta and her team are shouted out, because Northeast Women's Florida Veteran is a nonprofit that helps to house, that helps to mentor, that helps to provide services, job placement, career training. They are in the Jacksonville area, and just like Dr. Nixon said, they meet you where you are. They provide transportation, and that they're all about providing services to the women veterans. And so big shout out to her and her team, and they're just doing a phenomenal job in that women's space.
Thank you. So one subject we haven't talked about that I have to mention is, what about the children of veterans? Are there any particular issues or things that, Dr. Kane or Dr. Nixon, that you notice in children whose one parent or the other are away in military service? Or Errol, do you have any experience or knowledge in that area in terms of specific issues that children may face as a result of the extended period of time that their parent is away during service?
I'll let you think about it, Dr. Nixon. What I will say is, when that time that I mentioned about the Saratoga and the Forrestal, I served those military families, and I saw the effect that, with Dad being away, the effect that it had on those kids. I saw the effect that it had on the families, as a matter of fact, because, Dad was going, 6 months deployment, sometimes a little bit more, and this was basically Navy, that deployment. And Mom wound up being mother and father. And then the father had to come back home and try to be a father. But the kids have been seeing Mom as being mom and dad. And it sometimes affected their behavior toward their father, in terms of their resistance of any, for lack of a better description, authoritarian behavior or rule, as heads of the family. Because again, he or she were the people that were serving our country, but their families suffered quite a bit during their deployment. And then they spent a lot of time when they got back home trying to make up for their time missing. And that's a very difficult thing, depending on the age of those kids. Maybe in the early age of 5, 4, whatever it might be, maybe there's a whole lot of comeback in terms of those servicemen being able to reunite with their family and preserve the role that the father usually plays. And again, my experience at that time was mostly with men because it wasn't as many women in the military. But the role that they played in terms of coming back and trying to reassimilate into their family household, a lot of the children suffered, and you saw a lot of things happen in school, academics, very smart kids that sometimes were so, I don't want to say damaged, but so affected by the absence of that father or the head of the household, and then in women as well, because we all cherish our mother as well, and she has her special influence on us as individuals and as children. But that they're missing from that household, and it really affects that household. And I guess that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about what happens with our vets, is because they suffer not just on the battlefield, if they have to be in battle, not just on the non-battlefield related support that they give to other military people that are on the battlefield, but the loss of their influence and their ability to interact with their families cost them a lot. We're not even talking monetary. We're talking simply relationships and how they're able to raise their kids and interact with their families to a very positive, very, very positive node or, for lack of a better description, aspect in terms of what their kids are experiencing and what's going to affect them later on in life. Because we all know if dad ain't around, it can affect you to a certain degree. And that's why I'm so pissed me off about how they treat our military people, because they're not only giving up stuff that affecting them, to a great degree, they're giving up stuff that affect their families. And so
I could say, let me just say briefly that, because I know we're coming to the end, but one of my jobs when I was in the military, I was actually stationed at that Mayport branch clinic. And what happened, one of my side jobs was to work with some of the counselors. There was a building next door, which is where the gym is now. That's how long ago it was. But there's a counseling service there where, and I hate to say it, but I might have to say it, where they manage spouse abuse, child abuse, and all the abuses that happen from the what happens when these sailors are returning. And they wanted a doctor on this group to kind of help with, and I would hear the stories of individual counselors, because so everyone would get let's say a woman comes in and she got beat up by her husband, she would be given a counselor to walk her through the process. So those things do exist while you're in the military. They still do. And just as a side note, we were having a meeting when the O.J. Simpson trial verdict happened. And I said, "You all want to cancel?" They said, No, we're not canceling this. But anyway, that's another story. We'll have to do that one offline.
Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of things you've noticed that specific for children as the parent is transitioning or reintegrating into society, or back at home?
But just they did have some things for the children, not as much though. It was not they weren't a great they didn't have any specific services for them. We did have pediatricians for them, and we took care of their health, but their mental health was a bit lacking in the military system when I was there. Yeah,
not family friendly.
Right, except extremes, where they're abused and when they're, when things happen.
Or a guy like mine that showed up on the base with a shotgun in his trunk.
Oh my gosh.
Whatever, but that's another story.
Yeah, many stories.
But yes, Ms. Turner. So there, or Jocelyn, there are reintegration programs like the Yellow Ribbon program that is enacted. I know definitely within the Guard forces, the National Guard, whether that's Army or Air, that have those resources where, as a part of the service member coming back home, they offer the family members a time and a space to actually go out away from their normal environment and reconnect with the family once they've completed their reintegration training. And so they have recognized that service members, moms, dads, brothers, sisters going away can adversely impact those children growing up. And so they are trying to take steps to help curb any issues or mitigate any issues and really focus on that reintegration piece because they realize that if you address these issues on the front end, it's less work you're going to have to do on the back end, right? Because if we catch it early, then the symptoms and the issues don't keep growing, and then they get exacerbated from the initial onset, and then just keep growing and growing and growing. So, oh yeah, perfect. The Yellow Ribbon program, thank you for bringing that up, Tyrone, is truly a godsend for those reintegration. But that one specifically is about the education piece, which is a phenomenal program for any individual who's looking to go to college. It helps to offset the cost for private school, but definitely we do have the resources out there for our returning.
Other than medical care, do veterans have, and I know we're at the end of the show and probably going to have you all back, but are there any other resources that veterans can take advantage of if they walk into the doors of the VA, or if not the VA, where else can they go to help learn about and take advantage of the VA benefits, the veterans benefits, not VA benefits?
I'll let Dr. Nixon start on that one. I'll finish it out.
I think Eric's. Go ahead, Eric. Go ahead, Errol.
Okay, so yes, for members who've deployed, they are eligible for additional VA benefits, whether that's education, whether that's housing. There's so many different benefits now that the VA is providing to these individuals, and that's not including if an individual receives or incurs any type of illness or injury while they're deployed. And even worst case, if an individual does unfortunately have to passes away rather, while they're in service overseas, there are additional benefits granted the family because of that in a deployed location. So the VA, to their credit, is definitely listening to the veteran population and listening to the family of the veterans and trying to curb some of these issues and provide additional benefits. Also, in speaking with the press secretary for the VA, they're also going to be rolling out additional, I'm sure for all of our service members, just in general for our listeners and watchers, our audience, they've seen the commercials about the Camp Lejeune water. If any member has been exposed during a certain time period, where there are about to be 10 additional bases that are going to be released this summer that are, has been shown by the Department of Defense that, issues have arisen within the water. I just don't want to say the water because there are other factors and elements that come into play with that. But if you were stationed at these different bases during a certain time period, you will be afforded the availability to apply for additional VA benefits. And just like with the PACT Act, you'll be grandfathered in based on your time in service at that location. And so another thing that the VA is trying to do, you definitely got to get us back on here because there's so many benefits, is for veterans, especially Korean and Vietnam veterans who might not have access to their medical records. They are going to give you I don't want to say a pass, but they're going to afford you now the benefit of the doubt. Whereas previously, even for me, when I filed my VA claims, I had to prove everything. Everything that I was claiming, I had to have documentation for. But these new cases that are going to be opened up, I think that'll happen this summer. They won't have to have all of the medical documentation to substantiate that claim.
I'm glad
So I
you
know
mentioned that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Errol. I'm sorry to cut you off because I think about when all the things that Tyrone has brought up are typically accessible by computer. Korean and Vietnam veterans and even others might not be computer savvy or even, comfortable with going online. So, to know where to go and how to access these services is very important. And we're going to have you all back, right? And hopefully our other guest who was not able to join us tonight will also be able to join us next week. But this has been a great discussion about Black veterans and veterans in general in terms of the issues and benefits and services, a whole lot we have not touched on. Thank you to our guests for joining us. At the end of every show, we'd like to give our guests the opportunity to share your final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion. I'll start with you, Dr. Nixon. What are your final thoughts regarding tonight's discussions and on Black veterans issues, benefits, and resources?
Very good discussion. I guess just to kind of summarize, there's a lot out there for our veterans, and don't be discouraged. I just want to say, if anyone is listening to this podcast, there's so many services you can reach out to. They're building a brand new veterans center up off of Max Leggett, and I'll be there, unfortunately, because so I have to, not unfortunately, but I have to drive.
You will be there.
Yeah, I have to drive 30 minutes. So it's a brand new state of the art location.
Nice.
And so they're really trying to improve the services that we do and improve, and they're hiring new facilities, new doctors, because I've helped them recruit a few, and it's something that's out there. The VA will take care of its veterans if given a chance.
Thank you, Dr. Nixon. When is that anticipated to open? Any idea?
April.
Oh, this year?
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Nice. That's very nice. Errol has a big smile on his face, so obviously he knows about that. Thank you, Dr. Nixon. Errol, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic?
I definitely need to say that don't give up, because you are going to come to a point, and especially dealing with the VA, where you get denied, but you know that there's an issue. You have to continuously press the issue. And there's ways to get around certain things. If you don't have your records, like I say, they're going to open it up in certain cases. There's also things like nexus letters, where one issue has led to another issue. So don't give up the fight. There's resources out there. There are people out there. There are organizations that are here to help, whether it's the DAB, the DAV, the Florida Department of Veteran Affairs. The city of Jacksonville has 9 veteran service officers that work downtown. There are resources out here. So don't give up. Make the calls. There are organizations and people here to help you.
What's the name of the city of Jacksonville's Veterans Department?
Yes, ma'am. So it's the City of Jacksonville Military and Veteran Affairs Department, and that is currently chaired by Harrison Conyers. He was appointed by Mayor Deegan at the beginning of her administration to take on that role because he was the deputy prior to. But it's an amazing organization. Their phone number, I don't have it, but it's a 630 number. You definitely can reach out to them.
We'll put it out there. We'll get it.
Yes.
We will get it for you and be on the podcast.
Perfect.
Thank you, Errol. And also thank you, Dr. Nixon. And Dr. Kane, as you were talking tonight, I forgot about your experience of being a physician taking care of veterans back in the day, and since you've been here in Jacksonville. What are your final thoughts regarding tonight's topic?
Well, being in Health Zone 1, the majority of my career, 20-some years, 25 years, actually 30 plus years. Most of the time I've been here in Jacksonville. Being in that Health Zone area, I definitely can relate to all that our guests have said. I have gone the extra mile as well as my other colleagues. So it's not one of those for me, but it's for my organization, the Northeast Florida Medical Society. We go that extra mile with our veterans. And when I say extra mile, meaning in terms of trying to get into the system and how best to help our veterans. We appreciate physicians like Dr. Nixon and Dr. Ronald Stevens, who have helped us navigate those waters to be able to help our veterans. I'm most certainly happy about the new Veteran Center that's close to Health Zone 1. Even though it's not in Health Zone 1, it's easily accessible and it shouldn't be an issue. There are a whole lot of non-wartime issues, health issues that have affected our veterans. And these gentlemen, both of the gentlemen mentioned in terms of those, I think Camp Lejeune was one of them, but there are so many other areas in which the veterans, one, need help, and two, maybe there's help available, in terms of like smoking and stuff of that nature with veterans, because there was a time they was encouraging vets to smoke. And we all know what that meant in terms of
burn pits in Iraq and in the Middle East is
exactly all those. And I participated in one of the very earliest programs in which there was STD training. Not STD. What?
STI.
Yeah.
STI.
Not STD. I guess that's too much. But in terms of those programs that were affecting our veterans mentally and so on and so on, early on, to the extent that they were averse to it, but they have come around and they now recognize that there is those effects that affect those mental behaviors that affect our veterans that occurred simply because they're veterans. So all I'm encouraging is that as many people out there, especially our physician listeners, get in line, help these veterans as much as they can, because they allow you to be able to practice what you're doing, what you believe, and how you practice. They allow that to happen when they maintain the fight for our democracy. So if we can just make sure that we support our veterans like they support us, I'm all good.
Thank you, Dr. Kane, and thank you, Errol and Dr. Nixon. We're already getting positive feedback. I'm getting texts from folks who are saying, like, this is wonderful. Again, some people may have veterans in their families and their life and not really sure how to help those individuals. I'm going to get it right, Errol, this time, reintegrate into the community after serving in the military, and also recognizing when they do need additional help for things that they may not recognize within themselves. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to Pause for the Truth. Tune in next week. We're probably going to continue the discussion if we can get Damika on and the other young lady, Errol, that you mentioned with the Women's Veterans Agency here in Jacksonville. If we can get them on, because it will be interesting to hear their perspective. I know Damika started the Veterans Chamber of Commerce as an example. So we want to make sure that veterans know about all the resources that are available to them. Again, thank you all for tuning in.
And if we can get our two guests to come back next week as well, Ms. Turner, if they're willing.
Absolutely. And if you have not done so to our audience, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you and have a good evening.
Welcome to Pause for the Truth. We are grateful that you joined us today and hope you've gained valuable insights on our current topic. We look forward to having you with us next time as we explore trending issues in our community and discover ways to simplify life for you and your loved ones. Our dedicated panelists and staff are committed to sharing knowledge and serving our community. But now, we need your support. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and spread this valuable knowledge to others. Don't forget to invite your family and friends to tune in to our podcast every Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. EST. Visit our website at www.pauseforthetruth.com. Come and show your support by liking us on Facebook, following us on Twitter, and linking with us on LinkedIn. Feel free to email us with any questions, or concerns, or show topic recommendations at info@pauseforthetruth.com. I would also like to give thanks to our behind-the-scenes technology engineer, Tyrone Jackson, owner and operator of Call Tyrone. Go to www